boys and girls. We're going to talk about decimals. Decimals are fractions. That's one word for them. Or you could call that just part of a whole number. So I kind of created a small little place value chart. And we're used to seeing all of the normal things that are on the place value chart by looking at it this way. Okay, so we don't usually have decimal points. Let me try to get that centered better. All right, so here you go. We have our whole numbers, and we call that our ones period and our thousands period. And we don't usually have the word period there, but that's okay. That's just kind of right now to show that we have our sections. So in the ones period, we have the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place, and notice that they all end with S. Then we have a comma that separates the thousands from the ones periods. In each period, just like the ones period, there's a ones, tens, and hundreds. Except that in this one, it's thousands period, so it's 1,000s. And then we have 10,000s, and then 100,000s. So for today, we're only going to talk about pretty much in the ones period. You could have a number that's as big as 1,000 or whatever. You could have a number into the trillions or zillions. It doesn't really matter. Anything on the left side of the decimal point would be considered a whole number. Here's the decimal point, and the point, no pun intended, the point of the decimal point is to separate the whole numbers from the parts of a whole number. Now, I said we talked about parts of a whole number. Well, now in 4th and 5th grade, you're hearing about decimals, and you actually have talked and learned about decimals without learning these names. And the reason is because when you do money, you do numbers through the hundredths, because we talk about 100 cents, and we say that, well, if you have 99 cents, then it's $0.99. And then we always have a dollar sign. That's the adult version of saying I have 99 cents. Or you could just put 99 with a cent mark. If you're doing the adult version of the money, then you want to have that dollar sign, $0, and then the decimal point 99. Well, let's talk about decimals in more depth. Decimals are also known as fractions because fractions are known as parts of a whole. It isn't an entire entity, it just is part of it. So for example, we have our tenths section right here, and that means it's out of 10 equal parts. And so if you notice, tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, I have like a lisp when I speak because it has a THS at the end of each of these names. It doesn't if you look back over here. They just ended with S, right? Okay, so tenths are out of 10 equal parts. Hundredths, it would look like one big box with broken into 100 equal spots. So, or little boxes, I guess. But that's just the same as a hundredths chart, right? Without numbers on them, if you want it. Thousandths, it's a box, one big box that has 100 or 1,000 parts to it. Once you get to that 10 or that 100 or that 1,000, you then have to carry, right? You can't have 10 in any of the places here. You can only have 9 because in every place in the place value chart, 9 is your highest digit. So once you get to 10, you have to put a 0 to hold the place, and you carry into the next section. Well, if I have 10 tenths, that means that whole thing is filled in. And that means I put a 0, and I carry the number 1 into the ones place, or it shows how many whole amounts I have. I have one whole box. So let's look at another example. If I wanted to, I could show it as a fraction really quick too. I could say out of 10, something over 10. And if I had 3 boxes, I could put 3 over 10. And that would be 3 tenths. So that's where that fraction part comes in. All right, so knowing about the whole numbers and parts of a whole, let's talk about a little bit of some of the things we do in place value. Place value is about assigning the different digits into a place because they all have different values. So the values are a part of a whole number or a decimal or a fraction fall into your tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, and you're basically wanting to show your same forms of a number. Here, for example, we have standard form. Here's 1 and 5/10. That's how I would say it. 1 and 5/10. That's also how I'll write it in word form. And word form means my numbers can't be symbols anymore. They have to be in word format. 1 and 5/10. Well, I made a picture so that you can see it. I made this into 10 exact equal parts, and I know if you notice it's the same size and shape, and we're pretending it's perfectly beautiful. I realize I'm not the greatest artist, but the one whole is shown here because the one whole box is completely covered in. It was broken into 10 parts because I fell into the tenths section. So I want to show it into tenths. So this whole thing is one whole, and this is 5 of the other 10. So we say it's 1 and 5/10 of another. All right, when we write it, we say 1 and 5/10 though. Expanded form. Okay, we're used to doing 1 plus 0.5 when we do a decimal. Now, sometimes you learn it as the fraction version, and you could do it as 1 plus 5/10. That's actually not how you can do it. I wanted you to hear that because a lot of people want to do that. It's true, but it's not a good way to represent it. So I don't want you to do that. If you want to show it in fraction format, you would need to show 1 whole plus 5, because that's the number that's there, times 1/10. We want our tenths, our hundredths, and our thousandths. We want it to be 1 out of 10. Okay, so that we're using the main idea behind it. So we have 5 in the place, but we have it times 1/10, and here's where we'll have to use our our parentheses, excuse me. All right, so that's how I would show expanded form if I wanted to use the fraction format. If I just wanted to do decimals, here's how I would write it. 1 plus 0.5. So that means 0 whole, and then that means 5/10. What if I had the number 16 and 71 hundredths? Well, I wrote it in word form, but here it is in number form. And this is standard form. Well, I wanted to do that because I wanted to show you what you would do if you were adding or subtracting decimals. Well, we started with 16 whole, and so we had to make it into a decimal. So we put the other decimal down, 0.71, and then we said, well, if I want to make 16 into a decimal, I'll put a period at the end of the 16 and add how many ever zeros are needed. Well, 71 comes 2 places over, so I need 2 zeros. And 2 places over means I land in the hundredths place, 71. So I'm going to use the name 71 hundredths because that's where I landed. So I've added this whole number that I turned into a decimal. Notice that I lined up my decimal points, and when I added and I got my answer, I put a decimal point in the same exact spot. I didn't move it at all. But I would have carried right over into the ones column if this was a 10 or higher. It wasn't, so it's just 1, 7, 6, and 1. And that's just your basic adding. Same thing with subtracting. You kind of just forget that the decimal is there, but you have to have it there. Otherwise, it won't be part of a whole number. It will be a whole number. It won't be part of one. It will be a whole number. So I just kind of ignore it, and I still cross out the 6, and I borrow and make it a 5 and make that a 10 if that's what I needed if I was subtracting instead of adding. All right, so I've done it in word form, 16 and 71 hundredths. Notice that my 71 is a hyphenated number because it's a 2-digit. All right, 10. Now I want to show you expanded form. So here I showed you 10 plus 6 plus 0.7 plus 0.01. Okay, well, let's look at this. I did this on purpose. I set it up under the 16.71. I wanted to make sure that I put everything in its own place. Okay, I lined up my decimals and I didn't get rid of them, my decimal points. So the 1 was here, and remember all the other numbers had to be zeros. So 16 is really made up of 10 and 6, or 10 and 6. And if I wanted to make those whole numbers into decimals, I had to put the decimal point at the end and then put zeros after it. Okay, well, here's the 7/10, and notice I have 0 whole and 7/10. Well, I put the 0 at the end so that it had the same number of digits after the decimal point as the other numbers. Here's the 1/100th. So it's all by itself. The rest of the numbers are always 0, if you can see that. And that is how I would write it in word or in expanded form. Now, I started to show you that again, but remember, we can't do it that way. So it would be 10 plus 6 plus 7 times, I don't know why I erased that, that was right. Losing my mind. Okay, 7 times 1/10 plus 1, because there's a 1 there, times 1 over 100. That would be the new, that would be expanded form using fractions. All right, that's about it. I hope you are understanding that, and next lesson will be on rounding, but then we will get to rounding with decimals. Have a good one.